There are two types of people in this world: those who become the storm, and those who become the stillness within it. Both walk through fire. Both lose things they thought they could never live without. Both face the unknown. But only one remembers that power is not found in control, but in presence. The world tells you to move faster, to fix it, to figure it out immediately, to panic with the rest of them, to chase certainty like a man drowning chases the surface. But what if I told you the real power is in the pause, not in the reaction, but in the remembering? Because when everything around you is breaking, the money, the plan, the relationship, the identity, there's a deeper test taking place, a test you can't see, but you can feel. The test isn't whether you can solve the problem. The test is whether the problem can steal your state. This is where your life is decided, not by the circumstances, but by your stance. This was one of Napoleon Hill's greatest invisible truths. Beneath all his teachings on wealth, discipline, and achievement, there was a silent thread that your dominant mental state becomes your destiny, not because of luck, but because your state determines your decisions, and your decisions determine everything. So when everything goes wrong, the first real question is not what do I do? It's who am I in this moment? That question unlocks a different future, because it's not what you face, it's what you embody. And calm is not a mood, it is a message to the universe, a signal of strength, a proof of readiness. The one who stays calm is not lucky. They are trained, forged, built in silence when no one was watching. And now ... everything has gone wrong. Which means everything is asking you to rise. Let's begin. Ready for me to continue? Let's walk into the fire and listen for the silence within it. The noise outside is a test of the voice within. Word count 998. Character count 6,189. There's a moment always just before the collapse, a tension in the air, a shift you can't explain, a silence before the storm that feels like the universe holding its breath. And then it happens. The phone call, the bank notification, the betrayal, the diagnosis, the loss. The moment you thought would never come comes. And you feel the ground underneath you change. The structure you built shakes. The story you trusted breaks. The version of you that depended on certainty begins to unravel. But what if I told you this moment wasn't the enemy? What if this moment is your training ground? Napoleon Hill called it temporary defeat, not failure, not finality. Defeat, yes, but temporary. Why? Because the external condition isn't what determines your future. It's how you respond to it. But here's the truth. Most people don't respond. They react. Because when chaos strikes, the noise outside gets loud. Loud enough to drown out the one thing that actually matters, the voice within. And if that inner voice has never been trained, never been strengthened, never been tuned like an instrument, it gets swallowed. This is why some people collapse under pressure, while others become pressure-proof. It's not about intelligence. It's not about luck. It's not even about experience. It's about association. You see, most people have mentally fused hardship with doom, loss with identity, uncertainty with helplessness. So when the storm comes, their brain doesn't just say something bad is happening. It says, I am not safe, ... I am powerless. I'm about to lose everything. And once the mind agrees to panic, it will find every reason to justify it. This is what Napoleon Hill discovered through decades of studying the most powerful minds of his generation. He noticed something different about the greats, the ones who endured catastrophe, betrayal, financial collapse, even death sentence, and still created empires. They refused to let external noise rewrite their internal code. They anchored themselves in something deeper, and that anchor began with one decision. Will I react to this moment? Or will I remember who I am in it? It sounds simple. It's not. Because remembering is not about memory. It's about identity. And in moments of crisis, identity gets challenged. If your confidence came from comfort, the storm will take it. If your clarity came from control, the storm will break it. If your peace came from circumstances, the storm will strip it. But if your calm comes from consciousness, from a deeper awareness that you are not your outcomes, then the storm becomes something else entirely. It becomes a revealer. It shows you what you really believe. It shows you what your mind automatically turns to under pressure. It shows you whether your inner world is built like a fortress or a house of cards. And here's the secret. You don't build that fortress in the storm. You build it in silence. You build it in small moments when you choose clarity over chaos, breath over reaction, presence over panic. Hill once said, "Control your own mind, and you may never be controlled by the mind of another." But we can expand that truth. Control your own mind, and you may never again be controlled by circumstance. Because in that moment of impact, when everything goes wrong, the first weapon you have is awareness, not of the situation, but of the state the situation is trying to put you in. The situation might scream fear, but will you obey? The moment might demand urgency, but will you choose stillness instead? The world might expect your collapse, but will you surprise it with peace? Think of your mind as a sanctuary. When the noise gets loud, it's trying to enter that sanctuary and corrupt the altar. Your altar is your state, the sacred seat of your thought, feeling, and belief. And every reaction is a surrender, but every pause is protection. This is why the greatest power in a storm isn't force, it's clarity. It's the man who slows his breath when everyone else is running. It's the woman who closes her eyes and listens inward, not outward. It's the leader who doesn't flinch when the ground shakes. Not because they're superhuman, but because they train for this. They train not in the event itself, but in the way they met it. They train their nervous system to respond with presence. They train their thoughts to not be dictated by headlines, market crashes, or human betrayal. They train the voice within that cannot be stolen. And now you're here, in your storm, in your shaking, in your silence. And maybe you haven't trained for this before. Maybe you've reacted your whole life. Maybe your inner voice is barely audible under the weight of noise. That's okay, because it only takes one moment to begin the reversal. Right now, this moment could be the first time you remembered in the fire. You are not your losses. You are not your panic. You are not your circumstances. You are the one watching the storm. And the one who watches can choose. Ready to continue? Calm is not a feeling. It's a frequency, a state of alignment between thought, breath, and presence that most people never access because they are too busy fighting ghosts. Not real threats, perceived ones, projected ones. Because the human mind, when left unguarded, does not respond to what is. It reacts to what might be. This is the hidden psychology of fear. It begins not with reality, but with imagination. You receive a piece of bad news, and within seconds, the mind does what it's trained to do. Construct a future of collapse. A cinematic projection of everything falling apart, exaggerated and accelerated, and the body follows. The heart races. The stomach tightens. The mind narrows. Now you're no longer responding to what's actually happening. You're reacting to a movie you didn't even know you were directing. Napoleon Hill understood this mechanism long before neuroscience could explain it. He wrote, "Fears are nothing more than states of mind. And a state of mind is something one assumes." Assumes? In other words, fear doesn't require facts. It only requires belief. This is why calm under fire is not about being stoic on the outside. It's about breaking the chain, the mental link between event and panic. It's about reasserting authority over the space between stimulus and reaction. Because if you don't control that space, something else will. Old programming, parental voices, cultural scripts, trauma, and they all have one thing in common. They speak in urgency, but your inner wisdom, it speaks in stillness. You don't find calm by forcing it. You find calm by stepping back into authorship of your mind. The sculptor doesn't fight the marble. They shape it. So when everything goes wrong, the question is not, how do I escape this? It's, what am I shaping with this? The moment of chaos is the moment the sculptor picks up the chisel. Because every thought is a cut into the stone. Panic carves instability. Presence carves power. This is not spiritual fluff. This is biology, psychology, and discipline merged. Because once fear hijacks the imagination, it hijacks the nervous system. And once the nervous system is hijacked, your decisions come from survival, not strategy. That's when people burn bridges they need. That's when people say things they regret. That's when they give up on futures that were still possible. And it all started with a thought they never questioned. So let's question it now. Pause, breathe, pull the mind back from the scene. What's actually happening? What story are you adding to it? And what would your future self, the one who made it through this moment, tell you to remember right now? That voice is inside you. It's not imaginary. It's the same voice that kept Nelson Mandela calm in prison. The same voice that helped Viktor Frankl find meaning in a concentration camp. The same voice that whispered to Napoleon Hill when he lost everything more than once and still finished his life's work. That voice doesn't shout. It waits. And when you're done reacting, it returns. Because calm is not what you feel after the chaos ends. Calm is what you decide to become while the chaos is still happening. It is the declaration. This moment does not own me. My thoughts belong to me. I will shape it, even if it tries to break me. And you will be tested. You'll have days when everything hits at once. The financial loss, the family conflict, the doubt, the silence of no answer. You'll want to run, fix, escape, explain. But what if you just stayed? Not passive, present. What if you became the sculptor? You slow the breath. You speak to your thoughts like a king speaks to his court. You don't let fear sit on the throne. You don't give urgency to crown. You sit with the pressure, not to suffer, but to see, to watch the patterns, to catch the stories, to intercept the lie before it becomes a belief. That's what thought mastery looks like. It's not about controlling what thoughts show up. It's about deciding which ones get to stay, because the mind is a kingdom, and calm is the throne. And once you sit on that throne, fully, consciously, everything begins to reorganize around you. Not immediately, not magically, but inevitably. You speak with less noise. You choose with more clarity. You move from power, not from panic. And when people ask, how are you so calm when everything's going wrong? You won't need to answer, because the answer is not in your words. It's in your state, your stance, your stillness. Ready to keep going? Let's cross the bridge that most never see, the space between impulse and power, the silent bridge between reaction and response. Word count, 878. Character count, 5,587. There is a bridge. Invisible, silent. It exists between the moment something happens and the moment you decide what it means. Most people never step onto it. They leap from trigger to reaction, from emotion to explosion, from fear to collapse. And because they leap, they never learn. Never see that this in-between, this brief breath of space, is where mastery lives. This is where calm is chosen, not given. You see, the world tells you that your emotions are automatic, that your reactions are human, your anger justified, your panic inevitable. But if that were true, the most powerful people in history would have crumbled. They didn't, because they knew something. The first emotion is chemistry, but the second is choice. And it's in that second emotion, the one you author, that your power returns. Napoleon Hill didn't use the word bridge, but he spoke of thought habits, the ingrained neural patterns that determine your dominant state. He wrote, man can create nothing which he does not first conceive in the form of an impulse of thought. That impulse of thought, it comes before the action. And if you can interrupt it, you can redesign your life. This is where we enter the domain of the watchman, a symbol as old as human civilization, the sentinel at the edge of the city, the one who watches the horizon for signs of threat and decides what to let in. You are the city. Your mind is the gate, and your inner watchman decides what enters the castle. Most people fired their watchman long ago. Let fear walk in. Let anger burn the furniture. Let doubt rearrange the furniture and call it realism. But calm begins when the watchman returns and says, pause, pause, before the reply. Pause, before the assumption. Pause, before the spiral. This pause isn't weakness. It's power at rest. It's the bridge between who you were and who you are about to become. Because every reaction is a rehearsal for the next one. Every time you lash out, you train the mind to lash again. Every time you breathe instead, you build a new code. And this isn't about perfection. It's about pattern. You can still feel everything, the heat, the noise, the ache. But you don't have to act from it. You sit in it. You breathe through it. And somewhere in that silence, you begin to hear something deeper. The true voice, the one that doesn't shout, the one that whispers like a compass. It doesn't say, here's the answer. It says, you already know. But you can only hear that voice from the bridge, not the battlefield, not the panic room, only from the still space between. This is why elite soldiers train brief work, why CEOs meditate before meetings, why artists sit in silence before they paint. Because the ability to hold space instead of filling it with noise is a superpower. Let's visualize it. You're standing in a burning building, smoke everywhere. Your first instinct is to run. But there's a second option, one that doesn't come from fear, but from training. You pause. You look around. You see the staircase no one else noticed. That's what the pause gives. Option, clarity, escape routes that panic would have hidden. This is what separates those who fall apart from those who rise in pressure. Not intelligence, not experience, but their relationship with the space between. Hill believed that the mind could be trained like a muscle. And just like a muscle, it grows through resistance. Every time you want to react, but don't, you grow. Every time you breathe instead of blame, listen instead of lash, reflect instead of run, you strengthen the bridge. And one day, without forcing it, you'll find yourself in chaos. And instead of reacting, you'll wait, you'll listen, you'll choose. And someone will say, "How are you so calm?" But they won't understand. You're not calm because the fire isn't real. You're calm because the fire no longer controls you, because you've crossed the bridge, and on the other side is freedom. Would you like me to continue? Let's now enter the territory most avoid, the unseen. Anchoring to the unseen, faith over feeling, word count 717, character count 4,685. When the world shakes, people look for something to hold, something solid, something visible, something that feels real. But the greatest anchors are invisible. They are not made of steel. They are made of belief, not belief in fantasy, belief in alignment, in order, in something deeper than logic and more stable than emotion. Napoleon Hill called it faith, not in a religious sense, but as a state of being, a vibrational stance, a frequency of expectation that refuses to collapse under pressure, not because it's naive, but because it sees something the physical world hasn't revealed yet. He wrote, "Faith is the eternal elixir which gives life, power, and action to the impulse of thought." Meaning what? It's not enough to think clearly. You have to believe that your thought has weight, that it shapes reality, that your inner stance precedes the outer result. And that's what most people miss in a storm. They believe in what they feel more than what they know. They trust the weight of fear over the whisper of purpose. They let panic dictate reality. They forget that feelings are weather, not truth. So when everything goes wrong, they fall. Not because they were weak, but because they were never anchored to the unseen. And here's the paradox. The most unshakable people are not the ones with the most information. They are the ones with the most alignment. Because when the winds of chaos blow, it's not your plans that save you. It's your anchor. And your anchor is your faith. Not in a doctrine, but in a destiny. A felt sense, deep in your bones, that this moment is not the end of you. That the collapse is a recalibration. That the delay is not a denial. That the shaking is part of the shift. This is the difference between fear and faith. Fear looks at the facts and folds. Faith looks at the truth beneath the facts and holds. One is bound to circumstance. The other is bound to identity. And you've already felt both. You felt fear, the tightness, the racing thoughts, the grasping for control. But have you also felt that strange calm? The one that doesn't make sense? That moment when everything is falling apart and something inside you just knows you'll make it. That's not delusion. That's alignment. That's the deeper voice rising above the emotional storm. And that voice has a symbol, a lighthouse, standing on the edge of a black sea. Storms crash into it. Waves tower over it. Winds howl. But the lighthouse does not move. It doesn't need the storm to stop. It simply stays on. That's what faith looks like in practice. It's not passive. It's directional. It says, I see what's happening. I feel what's happening. But I'm not what's happening. And from that stance, that immovable posture, clarity returns, ideas return, solutions return, because fear blocks insight. But faith invites it. Faith brings coherence back to the mind. It signals to the nervous system, we are not in danger, we are in decision. And the moment you return to decision, you return to power. This is not about pretending everything is okay. It's about remembering that you are okay, even when everything else isn't, because you are not floating aimlessly in the dark. You are anchored, and that anchor is forged by every unseen choice you make in silence, every time you reject the lie that it's over, every time you speak life over your path, every time you show up anyway, not because it feels good, but because it's who you are. That's faith. That's the lighthouse, and it's not out there. It's in you. Would you like me to continue? Let's now go where all power begins, not with reaction, not with thought, but with identity. There's a point in every storm where instinct takes over. The body tenses, the breath shortens, the mind screams, do something. But instinct is not always intelligence. Instinct wants to survive. Identity wants to lead. And this is the moment where most people are separated, not by ability, but by who they believe they are in the storm. You don't rise to your highest potential under pressure. You fall to the level of your identity. This is what Napoleon Hill understood when he wrote about the definiteness of purpose, not just as a goal, but as a self-image. You must become the person who is unfazed before life gives you a reason to be. Calm is not an act you put on. It's a self you return to, but that self must be built. Because if you've spent a lifetime identifying with stress, with chaos, with proving your worth through struggle, then the moment things fall apart, your instinct will not be peace. It will be panic. Not because you're broken, but because your identity has not been rebuilt since the ruin. When people say, I can't stay calm, what they're often saying is, my self-concept is not stable enough to withstand this moment. Because calm requires structure, not external, internal. It's the architecture of a resilient identity, a sense of self that doesn't change with every shift in circumstance, a knowing that says, I've already decided who I am. This moment doesn't get to renegotiate that. Let's make this visual. Picture two figures walking into a storm. The first is wrapped in instinct, reactive, bare-skinned, flinching at every gust. The second is cloaked in something else. Not armor, not force, but presence. They walk the same terrain. They feel the same wind. But one is the storm, while the other is the calm within it. And the difference is identity. This is where we must ask a brutal question. Who have you been becoming by default? Every repeated emotional response, every panic spiral, every overreaction, every self-sabotaging loop is training the nervous system to expect more of the same, not because it's what you want, but because it's what you've rehearsed. So if you want to become calm, not just feel it occasionally, but embody it, you must rewire the identity that lives beneath your reaction. And here's the truth. That identity cannot be built in chaos. It must be built in silence, in the small sacred moments where no one is watching. When you choose to slow your breath instead of rush your fix. When you choose to pause the thought before it becomes a habit. When you choose to rewrite the story, not with drama, but with design. That's where the calm is built. You must install a new self-concept. One that does not flinch when plans break. One that does not tie peace to predictability. One that carries its own weather, regardless of the climate. This is not just emotional resilience. This is spiritual strategy. Because your future does not need you to be more frantic. Your future needs you to be the eye of the storm, unmoved, clear, grounded. Let's say it plainly. You are not the broken one reacting. You are the rebuilder remembering. And that rebuilt self, the one that walks calm into the fire, wears something different. An invisible suit, not of ego, but of certainty. Not of bravado, but of presence. The suit is made of every decision you've ever made to remain still when the world pushed. Every time you didn't match the chaos. Every time you chose identity over instinct. And here's the truth no one tells you. Calm is not for the weak. It's for the trained. Because it takes strength to not react. It takes courage to hold your center when nothing is secure. It takes vision to see through the illusion of collapse. So the question becomes, when the next storm comes, who will answer it? The child of instinct or the architect of identity? The one who reacts to the noise or the one who speaks from stillness? Because one of them will always be louder, but only one will lead, ready to close it out. Let's bring it all home to the deepest truth. The eye of the storm is always within. Word count, 639. Character count, 4,137. The storm doesn't end when the noise stops. It ends when you stop needing the noise to stop. In order to be at peace, that's the quiet shift. That's the internal revolution. And it doesn't come with firework. It comes like a breath. A steady moment of realization that calm was never a reward for getting it right. It was a birthright, hidden beneath the reactions you were taught to normalize. You were never meant to live in survival. You were designed to lead yourself through chaos, not by controlling the world, but by mastering your stance within it. Napoleon Hill never promised a life without failure, loss, or fear. He promised that if you mastered your state, your dominant mental frequency, you could transcend circumstance. And now, here you are. Maybe the storm is still raging around you. Maybe the decisions haven't been made. Maybe the money hasn't come. Maybe the healing hasn't arrived. But maybe, just maybe, you don't need those things to be calm. Maybe the real wealth, the real power is the discovery that you can remain still, regardless, that when the fire comes, you don't burn. When the waves rise, you don't sink. When the silence stretches, you don't spiral. Because there is something unshakable within you. A mountain the wind cannot move. A clock that doesn't rush. A soul that does not ask for permission to be steady. This is the eye of the storm, and it is within you. Always has been. So now the invitation is simple, but not easy. Stop waiting for peace to come from the outside. Stop negotiating your presence with the world. Stop outsourcing your center. Instead, return. Return to the version of you that's been watching all along. The version who doesn't need to react. The one who speaks softly, but carries weight. The one your future is built on. Because chaos is not your teacher. Calm is. Calm teaches clarity. Calm teaches courage. Calm teaches timing. And once you know that, not just intellectually, but in your breath, in your choices, in your silence, then nothing outside of you has the power to unmake you again. So the next time everything goes wrong, remember, the world might shake, but you do not have to, because you are not waiting for peace. You are becoming it.